Samyang, also known as Rokinon, has been teasing this adapter for a bit over a year. We got some footage at IBC 2023, but other than that, it's been a lot of silence. They reached out to me earlier this year, and even though I have a gripe with adapters, I agreed to reviewing this one because it seemed super straightforward to use and brought some new ideas to the conversation. Let's take a look together. In a time when every product must have a super original and distinct name, it's curious to see this lens is named 1.7 times anamorphic MF adapter. The MF stands for manual focus before you have any ideas. It was specifically designed to work with Samyang's Cine VAF lenses, which only come in E-mount and, as the AF in the name states, benefit from Sony's famous autofocus. In this episode, I'm switching over to a Sony FX3. These are pretty reliable primes, and I have no complaint about their autofocus. I got here a full set from 24mm to 35, 45, 75, and 100mm, all T1.9, except the 100mm, which is T2.3. They're a fun project because at the front, you have these electronic connectors, which hint at more special uses out of them. When just using the sphericals, the only ring on them is a focus override that surpasses the autofocus. The 1.7 times adapter is designed to be paired with these lenses and only these lenses. It weighs 900 grams or 2 pounds and measures 85 millimeters in height. It does not change size while focusing. The rear shows some internal movement, but the body itself does not move and the front does not rotate. The adapter has no filter threads, but an outer diameter of 95 millimeters for clip-on matte boxes. The taking lenses all weigh 280 grams or 0.6 pounds, which is super light, and have similar sizes. The mount of the adapter is a perfect fit to the taking lenses, and we have a very cool little latch at the bottom that secures them together. This means I can't misalign this, even if I tried. It also means no dealing with clamps nor threads, and that makes me a very happy camper. If you're in doubt that the connection is secure, the light at the front of the adapter should turn on. That doubles as a tally lamp, turning red when you hit record. Once the adapter is connected, the ring on the lenses controls the iris, and all the focusing is done through the adapter. Minimum focus comes down to just under 70 centimeters or 2 foot 3 inches with both metric and imperial markings. Focus throw is approximately 270 degrees and the focus ring is geared. This is not a variable diopter setup though. It is a pretty clever design that relies on the electronics and the fancy connection between adapter and taking lens. What the system does is, the adapter passes the focus distance information to the taking lens, and the spherical's internal electronics adjust it to match focus, creating the simplest synchro focus setup I've ever seen. The downside is we're bound to see some squeeze change at close focus, but more on that later. The adapter came out just now in May of 2024, and it went straight to retail. You can get it from Rokinon or Samyang's website for $1,000. I'm curious to see how the price will fluctuate as this reaches the used market as well. $1,000 is not cheap, especially when you consider it only pairs up with Samyang's VAF lenses, which also cost between $500 and $800 US. So not a cheap setup to get started. If you own any of the lenses previously to getting the adapter, it is essential that you update their firmware so the adapter works correctly. Running an old version means that the lens won't take the focus distance from the adapter, and you will always have blurry results. Sony offers both full frame and Super 35 crops, so let's see what the adapter can do here. On the longer focal lengths like 100mm and 75mm, there's no doubt that we'll get full frame coverage. Still, as we get to 35 and 45mm, the image on full frame is still clear. 1.7 times squeeze on Sony's standard 16:9 recording modes means that we get a 3:1 aspect ratio right out of the gate. So I prefer to crop it in for normal widescreen. That means that we can definitely clear the 35mm for a 2.39:1 delivery. The 35mm with a 2.39:1 crop gives you a horizontal field of view equivalent to a 23mm. If you need a wider aspect ratio, or if you're using the 24mm, then you will have to move to Super 35. As Sony doesn't offer in-camera D-squeeze or crop marks, I highly recommend that you set up an external monitor to help you visualize what you're capturing. I'm using Axoon's CMO 4K and an iPhone for this, as it gives me custom crop marks, custom D-squeeze, and much more. When it comes to resolving power, Samyang's adapter holds up pretty well, even as we go fast. As a synchro focus adapter, we don't have the performance hit of a variable diopter when we go to longer lenses, but we do lose on some squeeze as we get to minimum focus. I feel performance is similar with the 35 and 45mm, showing some smearing in the very corners, which doesn't improve much as we stop down. General and center performance improves though. The 24mm on Super 35 behaves similarly, with smeary corners even when stopped down. Because my TV isn't as big as I'd want it to be, I could only capture these charts at minimum focus, which is where the system has the weakest performance. The further from the subject, the better the image quality. A little bit of blooming when wide open, generally, but in all of the taking lenses. When we go to the 75mm, that's a sharp performer. We see a little bit of highlight control as we go from T1.9 to T5.6, but in general, you don't need to stop it down in favor of performance. On a 100mm lens, we have less general smearing, but definitely some color fringing with blue smudges around high contrast elements towards the corners as we stop it down. It's particularly visible on this distortion grid. Since this is a synchro focus design, at minimum focus, we are looking at 1.5 times squeeze instead of the original 1.7 times. It's worth writing down this number to adjust the squeeze whenever we have a close-up that starts to look a little bit off. Like this talking head, I had to dial it down. The coatings on the adapter are gorgeous and warm, leading us to flares that are strong and amber, multifaceted, with various surfaces catching the light. We have some saturated blue secondaries and a little bit of a green streak, which must come from the taking lenses. In terms of distortion, we have pretty nice barrel curves on the wide end, and it's funny to see how they straighten as we get to the 75 and 100mm. I almost feel like it's been cushioning a bit, but I've drawn several lines over these grids and it must be a subconscious thing. When looking at real footage and not grids, I can't see distortion on the long taking lenses. I gotta say, the first thing that came to mind when I heard this adapter existed, had electronics inside, connected to autofocus lenses, and worked only on Sony cameras, I thought it was gonna be our first foray into autofocus anamorphics. Sadly, it's not. Not that it hurts the performance or value of the lens, but it would have been really cool to see how this would all work with internal motors. I'm eager to see who's going to put out the first autofocus anamorphic in the market. Samyang's is a heavy adapter, making an otherwise compact setup pretty front heavy. The size is justified by the performance, and 1.7 times squeeze is not too shabby, giving us oval enough bokeh and spectacular lens flares, alongside the very characteristic barrel distortion. This is minimum focus on the 35mm, and it's really not that bad actually. You can use diopters to address this, but you will have to mount them on a matte box. And even though we don't have threads at the front, using a clip-on is a great solution for filters. I love this approach to synchro focus. It might not be autofocus, but it's technically halfway there. I found it was super easy to do lens swaps because of the adapter's mounting mechanism, and although we have the loss of squeeze factor, we lived with synchro focus setups for decades. Adjust the D-squeeze in post when you're at mints. It's an extra step, but not the worst thing to deal with when using adapters. Plus, you are recording more info on the sides anyways because of Sony's forced aspect ratio, so a lesser squeeze is manageable because you have footage. 1.7 times squeeze is a great number for anamorphic character. Now all we need is for Sony to get their features straight. What are your thoughts on it? Please share them in the comments below. I'm also curious to see what other reviews are going to be like. Thanks for hanging out until the end. See you on the next one. Chito Fahadas, out.